What does people mean when they say mulliganing aggressively? Well, in this video, we're gonna talk about that and more. Welcome to a competitive commander mulligan tutorial. You might have seen people mulliganing down to 4, 5, 6 cards, sometimes even 3 if they're extremely hardcore. The reason they are doing that is that they are looking for a specific opening hand that's gonna give them a great start. That is what it means to mulligan aggressively. For example, a turn 1 dork and pass is considered a decent start, but it's nowhere near turn 1 Sol Ring. Tap that for an arcane signet and tap that for a mystic remora and then pass. And that is what you're aiming for when you're mulliganing aggressively, or something of that similar sort. For example, if you're mulliganing down to extreme free cards, if you have 1 land, 1 mana crypt and 1 heuristic study, you're fine. You're gonna pass the turn with that, you're gonna draw more cards with the heuristic study, and you're already at 3 mana at your turn 2. You're probably gonna be able to develop something from this. Is it worth it though? The answer is usually yes. There are a few cases where you should probably settle and be happy with what you have, depending on what form of commander that you're playing and depending on what form of pod you're in with. A good example of commander decks that are actually aggressively mulliganing quite a lot are, for example, Paco Haldan, Kram in few various situations, Elche of the Infinite, Joyra, Ursa also, Gitrog Monster, Korvold, etc. One thing these commanders have in common is that their decks are built around the focus of the commander. Get the commander into play and then start to develop your game plan from there. What these commanders are usually looking for are fast mana. But I do have an example of a commander deck that doesn't aggressively mulligan, my cEDH deck for example. How it's built is that it doesn't really matter what cards you have in your hand, it is always going to consistently produce the same effect. cEDH is going to enter somewhere down the line. She doesn't have to enter as fast as I can, because you usually want to develop your board state with mana and hate bears before you cast cEDH. So what you have in your hand doesn't really matter, and you don't need to mulligan that aggressively, and you can settle with a first 7 or a second 7 and sometimes a 6 if you have to mulligan. Then you have various mid-range decks, for example Kenrith the Returned King or Thrasius variants. These decks aren't really focused around the commanders either. They have basically a well-built deck on its own that can play the game however it wants to. So it doesn't really aggressively mulligan towards a specific hand, it will settle with something it believes is good enough for the moment. And it can usually stay around 6, 7 cards. Sometimes it goes down to 5 if you're unsatisfied with your hand result, but you're not looking for a specific ritual package that's going to give your commander into play as fast as you can, because a turn 2 Kenrith isn't as impressive as a turn 2 Korvold or let's say a turn 2 Kram. But one thing you have to take into consideration when you're mulliganing like this is the pod, the opponents that you're playing against. You could be too greedy and you could go a little bit too all in. Let's take that turn 1 heuristic study for example again, and let's say you don't have a hand afterwards. What happens if someone uses a force of will or a counterspell of some sort, removing that heuristic study for you? Well, you're in a really horrible position. You now have 1 land, 1 mana crypt, and your hand is empty. You're gonna be in top decking mode, and this could turn out horribly. But aggressively mulliganing can also give birth to other people also aggressively mulligan. cEDH is a fast format. Games can easily end around turn 3, sometimes turn 4, but even sometimes turn 2. That means that you have to have a really impactful hand that can produce a lot of power in the early stage of the game. You don't want to sit back and watch one of your opponents speed off and run away with the game just because you kept a safe hand of 7 that contained a mana dork turn 1, where someone just bursted in with more power, emptied their entire hand with fast mana, and then refilled their entire hand with some card drawing capabilities. And that is why some commander decks in this current metagame that usually don't wanna aggressively mulligan are mulliganing aggressively for a matching hand to combat these fast turbo ad nauseam farm decks or these other fast all-in combo decks, just to match their pace in speed. So how you mulligan will end up being metagame dependent. If you're playing in a really slow, stacks heavy, control heavy metagame, you should probably keep a hand of 7, as games will usually go a little bit longer. And being greedy and mulliganing aggressively could simply just backfire. I hope this video gave you some new knowledge. And if you currently aren't trying to mulligan aggressively towards a super duper ultra mega hand that can take over the game in the early stage of the game, then I highly recommend you start experimenting and trying to do that and just see if that helps your win rate. That's it for me and my video. Hope you liked it, and I'll see you next time, guys.
Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you like what I do and you wanna support me, feel free to share my videos or even checking out my Patreon page. Also, purchasing cards from the TCG Players website using the affiliate link in the description below of the video will also help the channel grow. So a big thank you to all of you.